What is a preview? Well, I'm actually not sure what it's meant to be. All I know is that we are now in the preview phase of the embargo, meaning I can only talk about things up to a certain chapter, and there are many things I cannot reveal yet, like some of the new costumes, but that still leaves me with plenty of things to say. So let's crack on with it, shall we? I am really glad this game is getting a Switch release. I never actually thought it would happen considering how little interest there was in the game on the Wii U in Japan. It's still not entirely clear why this game was ostensibly a failure in the region it should have done well in. It's an extremely Japanese game, even more so than Persona 5. Tokyo Mirage is basically a story about a whole bunch of industries and cultural phenomena that only people in Japan would fully understand. Perhaps though this contributed to its low sales the first time round. This project was heralded from its inception as a Shin Megami Tensei and Fire Emblem crossover, but it's barely either of those games. It's much more like Persona, with a story centered on idol culture, with sprinklings of Fire Emblem on top. And don't get me wrong, Tokyo Mirage would be a significantly worse game without the Fire Emblem elements. I absolutely love the Fire Emblem leveling and skill system, and the awesome designs the Fire Emblem characters have in this game. And if you're wondering what I mean by that, I guess it's time to get into the basics. And speaking of basic, if you're watching this and you aren't subscribed,
you're basic.
Tokyo Mirage, and that's what I'll be calling it from now on because Tokyo Mirage Sessions is really hard to say when I'm speaking quickly from this script, as I mentioned earlier, is basically a Persona game about idols and idol culture. I won't go too much into the story for this preview, but you play as Itsuki, a man with many friends and acquaintances who either are idols, want to be idols, or just want to be famous in general, and it isn't long before you're dragged into the mix. It turns out that lots of idols and performers, especially ones working for a particular talent agency, also happen to be Mirage Masters, who formed a bond with a Fire Emblem character who has taken the form of a Mirage. There are also lots of bad Mirages though, and the bad ones can possess people, bringing out their worst qualities or influencing them to do terrible things in order to harvest something called Performer, which all us humans possess. In between training, performing, and just trying to live their lives, Itsuki and the gang will need to venture into what are essentially JRPG dungeons called Idolospheres to track down the big bad Mirages who are causing havoc in various locations around Tokyo. The game has a Persona-like structure in this way, but less restrictive. There are sections called intermissions, but none of the activities in the game are restricted to them. Even if you choose to progress to the next main story section, you can still do side quests, EX dungeons, and character side stories at any time. Now before I talk a little bit more about the excellent combat system, I have to address the elephant in the room. Most of you should know by now that I am anti-censorship, but I'm also a realist and a reasonable person in general. There's no point in going really deep into the censorship controversy surrounding Tokyo Mirage in this preview because I'm only allowed to cover the game up to Chapter 3 right now. I promise there is a much longer and much more in-depth video coming next week that I've been working on for a long time, but here's the long and short of it. There are still things that are censored in Encore. Some of the censorship is totally unnecessary and strange, but I'm going to tell you right now, plain and simple, it does not ruin the game and it does not dramatically change the experience over the Japanese original. In fact, Atlas, who were in charge of localization, went to painstaking lengths to ensure their vision and the experience remained intact and consistent. They even re-recorded the voice lines, which are in Japanese only, to make them accurate to changes in the international version, despite the fact that almost nobody in the West would have noticed if they just left the original lines in there. Also, the localization director was the chief event planner on the original Japanese release, his main duty being planning the story events and sequences for the main characters to ensure continuity and character arc integrity. I will talk more about this in the aforementioned much longer video next week because there is honestly a lot to cover. Just know that it's perfectly valid to feel annoyed at the censorship of some of the anime titties. I like them in games just as much as the next guy, but there is no reason to fear you are getting a different message or a vastly different experience due to any of the changes. And what an experience it is. I've put in just shy of 16 hours so far, having just completed Chapter 3, and I've loved every minute of it. The battle system in particular is just fantastic. As I mentioned earlier, the main characters have all bonded with a Fire Emblem character who's taken the form of a Mirage. Battles take place on a circular stage and are of the turn-based variety, taking elements from more traditional systems like the one in Persona and Fire Emblem, since the entire skill and ability system is mostly taken from Fire Emblem. But battles mostly revolve around brand new mechanics that take inspiration from the game's idle and stage performance setting. Finding an enemy's weakness and using a skill or ability that exploits that weakness will trigger a session where other party members jump in and perform an attack, sort of like stringing a combo together. And while it does actually feel overpowered at first because you can take down enemies in a single turn, you find that the game becomes more and more balanced around this mechanic, meaning you don't stand a hope in hell of taking down bosses and strong enemies without using it to its fullest. Even by Chapter 3, new battle elements are being introduced. There are special attacks called ad-lib performances, which are unlocked by completing character side stories. They have a random chance to trigger when you're using another attack, and are much more powerful than a regular skill. There are also duo skills which can be triggered during an ongoing session. Being a true turn-based system that it is, you're not beholden to waiting on an ATB bar to fill, so battles actually feel quick, snappy, and flashy, and they are visually very gorgeous. I'll get more into things like dungeons, puzzles, the beautiful animations, and the story in my full review when the embargo lifts next week, so I'll just leave it here for now. I'm really glad this game is getting another shot on the Switch, and you should be too. JRPG fans, Persona fans, Atlas fans, you're all going to have a damn good time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon.